Do you like crazy anime battles? Do you enjoy highly complicated power systems? Are you fond of extremely horny clowns that make you question whether or not you're even watching anime anymore? Well, if so, you'll enjoy Heaven's Arena, the second Hunter x Hunter arc, and the topic of this video, as I've been rewatching and reviewing the entirety of Hunter x Hunter. But before I begin talking about Heaven's Arena, I'd quickly like to say that this is the second video in my Hunter x Hunter series, so if you haven't watched the first one yet, I recommend it. The link will of course be in the description. And if you do enjoy this video going forward, then please make sure to smash that like button, leave a comment down below, and hit that big red subscribe button, because I'm currently aiming for a total of 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and any help in that goal would be really appreciated. However, with that all said and done, let's begin talking about Heaven's Arena. So, the second Hunter x Hunter arc kicks off with Gon and Killua arriving at Heaven's Arena, so they can earn some money and train for Gon's fight with Hisoka. But before properly climbing the tower, they must first take a quick strength evaluation, which will determine what floor they start on, and of course, Gon and Killua pass with flying colours, allowing them to go straight to floor 50. However, they're not the only freakishly powerful children there, as we're introduced to Zushi, who also heads to the 50th floor with Gon and Killua, where we first meet Zushi's master, Wing, but more on him in a bit, because just after meeting, Zushi and Killua must fight so they can continue to progress. But unlike the beginning of Heaven's Arena, fights can now be decided with points, which are earned from clean hits, critical hits, and knockdowns. However, if someone is completely knocked out, then the match is over, and you'd expect Killua would be able to win with a knockout, but that isn't the case, because Zushi refuses to get knocked out no matter what. And eventually, Zushi unleashes a mysterious power that leaves Killua in shock, because it reminds him of his brother Ilumi. So already, we're left to wonder what this ability is, but before we can see it used, Wing interrupts the battle by reprimanding Zushi with a scream so loud it leaves the whole stadium in shock. And without this ability, Zushi was left with no hope of victory, and Killua wins, allowing him to advance with Gon. Although that'll have to wait until after Gon and Killua are taught about Nen, and the four major principles that make it up: Ten, protection; Zetsu, suppression; Ren, refining; and Hatsu, release, from Wing. But unfortunately, Killua realizes that Wing isn't being completely truthful when explaining Nen, so Gon and Killua decide to leave and continue climbing the tower without the ability to use Nen. And it doesn't really seem to matter that much, because Gon and Killua make it to the 200th floor with seemingly no issue. Well, almost no issue. Upon arriving at the 200th floor, both Gon and Killua are met with Hisoka, who stops them from passing with his Nen, so they must learn how to use Ten before passing Hisoka, which is pretty bad because they have to register for the 200th floor by midnight the same day. And honestly, I might be wrong about this, but I believe Hisoka did this for them, as on the 200th floor, everyone can use Nen, and those who can't are beaten to a bloody pulp, some even dying in the process, and I don't think that Hisoka is really gonna allow Gon to die, so it makes sense that he would stop him. But either way, Gon and Killua must get cracking, cause they only have about 4 hours left until the deadline, which means they must train with Wing and then immediately return to Heaven's Arena right after, but there's no way they can learn Nen the usual way in such a short amount of time. So Wing uses his Nen to force open each and every aura node in both Gon and Killua's bodies, which makes all their life force seep out, so they must learn to hold on to it, and they do so almost instantly, making both of them naturals, which only makes sense. After all, Gon is the child of Jing Freaks, an extremely infamous hunter, and Killua is a part of the Zoldyck family, a family made up of only the finest assassins, so really it just makes sense that they'd be good with Nen. Anyways, once they've learned a bit of Nen, they can then return to Hisoka and pass right through his with ease, although Hisoka has no interest in fighting them at the moment because they really only know how to use Ten, one of the basic principles. However, Hisoka tells Gon that they can fight if he's able to win one match on the 200th floor, which doesn't sound too bad, but keep in mind, Gon is up against Nen users now, and Hisoka has already made it abundantly clear that Gon and Killua are still novices. They are progressing at an extremely fast rate, but in comparison to everyone else, they've still got a long way to go. Which is why Gon ultimately loses his next battle against a man named Guido, because Gon still has a very little understanding of how Nen works, unlike Guido, who already has a Nen ability. So during their fight, Gon is pretty much helpless, and he takes one hell of a beating for the third time now at the hand of Guido's Nen-enhanced spinning tops. Although, for a moment, Gon does come up with a way to dodge them by using Zetsu, another principle of Nen that suppresses his aura, which shows just how impressive Gon's ability to adapt is. But in the end, Gon takes a wrong turn and finds himself being hit with spinning tops from every direction, which causes him to lose with a broken arm yet again. And after this battle, Gon is actually given one hell of a smack by Wing, who is utterly furious with him for using Zetsu and being so reckless while fighting Guido. And as a punishment, Gon is forbidden from competing in any matches and from practicing Nen while his arm recovers, which means Gon won't be fighting Hisoka for a good while, but Hisoka does have a match coming up against a man named Castro, another fighter from the 200th floor who battled with Hisoka 2 years prior to the story, and ever since then he's been training in Nen so that one day he could fight Hisoka again and win, which also makes this a grudge match between the two, and I'd be lying if I said it wasn't incredible because it 100% is. So why don't we just begin talking about Hisoka versus Castro. So the fight begins with Castro landing a clean hit and knockdown on Hisoka, which is already pretty shocking because Hisoka is one hell of a powerhouse, but it gets even worse for him when Castro uses a technique called the Tiger Bite Fist to rip off Hisoka's right arm, which has very little effect on Hisoka. In fact, during all the chaos, Hisoka is even able to figure out how Castro's ability works. His ability allows him to create a doppelganger, a version of himself that can fight alongside him, but at the cost of draining his own Nen at a very fast rate. But what does Hisoka do with this information? Well, he throws a simple piece of cloth into the air and then begins performing card tricks with extremely difficult maths equations that completely throws Castro off his game. But after flinging a single card at Castro, the fight then continues with Castro taking Hisoka's second arm, before noticing that his right arm has magically been reattached, which leaves Castro in a state of confusion. In the beginning, Castro was absolutely destroying Hisoka, but all of a sudden, the fight has changed. Castro has no idea what Hisoka's Nen ability is, so at this point, Hisoka is just playing with his food. At the moment, Castro is realizing just how dire his situation is. Even after training for 2 whole years, he's still being messed with by this clown, and the nerves obviously get to him when Hisoka starts yapping. So Castro's dead in the face, but how was Hisoka able to determine which Castro was the real one? Well, it was pretty simple for him actually. He just needed to spill a tiny bit of his blood on Castro without him noticing, because doing that would allow him to see a clear difference between the real Castro and the doppelganger. And when Castro realizes what's just happened, he loses it. Even though Castro was built up as a powerful character that could actually pose a threat to the ever-powerful Hisoka, that was never really the case, From the very beginning of the fight, Hisoka has been in complete and utter control of the situation. He's just been having a bit of fun because he's a lunatic, plain and simple. But he's had his fun. So the fight ends with cards flying straight at Castro, piercing him over and over again until Castro dies and Hisoka wins. Now, I'm gonna say what we're all thinking. This fight is incredible. Not only do we get to see Hisoka in all his glory, but we also get our first real look at what Nen is capable of. Like, I know we had Guido's spinning tops, but if I'm being honest, they were just a bit boring in comparison to the crazy shenanigans that both Castro and Hisoka pulled off during this fight. So I can't help but love this battle, but moving on, because we actually meet another character when Hisoka is walking off stage, named Machi. Another Nen user like Hisoka that can use an ability called Nen Threads, and we learn that Hisoka is actually paying her to reattach both his arms. But wait a moment, didn't Hisoka magically fix one of his arms already? Well, technically yes, but also no. Hisoka was actually using two different Nen abilities to trick Castro. These abilities are Bungee Gum and Texture Surprise. Bungee Gum gives his aura the properties of both rubber and gum, while Texture Surprise allows him to change the texture of a cloth, and he uses both of these abilities in a multitude of different ways throughout the series, and the level to which he uses these abilities in his fight with Castro alone is incredible. But if I went into detail with how he used them, we'd be here for a while, because it gets very, very complicated to say the least. But back to Machi, who drops one hell of a bombshell. Turns out, her and Hisoka are both members of the infamous Phantom Troop, and that they're meeting in York New City on the 31st of August. So everything is coming together. The Phantom Troop will definitely be in the same place as Gon, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika. But that isn't the only twist we get. It's also revealed that Hisoka isn't a real member. He's only pretending to be so he can fight with their boss. But more on that in the next video, because it's time to return to Gon, who's fully recovered in half the time it was supposed to take, and with that, Gon and Killua can continue to learn Nen. However, while doing so, the two are tricked by Guido and his two buddies, Sadaso and Railvelt, into fighting them by using Zushi as a bargaining piece, which causes Killua to lose his shit. And honestly, the look he gives Sadaso while threatening him is absolutely nightmarish, and apparently Sadaso thought the same, because he did not show up for his match against Killua. Instead, he just left Heaven's Arena and never turned back. Although Guido and Railvelt didn't. They stayed to fight and then very quickly regretted it, because in the time since Gon and Killua first arrived at Heaven's Arena, they've grown exponentially, so now their Nen is much greater than Guido and Railvelt's, which means their fights are pretty one-sided. In fact, I think Gon was a little too cold with it when he shattered Guido's prosthetic leg. But that doesn't matter. What does is the fact that Gon can now challenge Hisoka. But before their battle, Gon needs to do some serious training, because Hisoka is still on a different level, and as a part of that training, Gon, Killua, and Zushi will find out which Nen type they belong to. So basically, there are 6 different Nen types named Enhancer, Manipulator, Conjurer, Emitter, Transmuter, and Specialist. These types can be determined with water divination. Gon is an Enhancer, Killua is a Transmuter, and Zushi is a Manipulator. After learning their types, Gon, Killua, and Zushi are then told to train in water divination so they can become more familiar with their Nen typing. So that's exactly what they do, although Wing never expected Gon to grow as much as he did. When Wing tests both Gon and Killua in water divination, it's clear to see how far they've come, but Gon in particular has made incredible progress, increasing the amount of water in the divination glass so quickly that the glass breaks and water spews everywhere. So it's safe to say that Gon has come a long way since the beginning of this arc, and because of that, Wing makes him an official hunter, as to become a hunter, you must also know how to use Nen. So the Hunter Association holds a secret exam after the public exam that aims to teach hunters how to use Nen, and with Gon now an official hunter, he's only got one thing left to do. He needs to punch Hisoka. So now we're gonna move on and talk about one of the most disgusting and brilliant fights of all Hunter x Hunter, Hisoka versus Gon. So the fight starts with both Gon and Hisoka entering the ring, as you'd expect, but then something happens, and I'm not taking the piss here. Hisoka is literally as hard as stone right now. And his raging knob is covered with a shining light as we see the word swing appear on screen. Now, I'm genuinely confused. Why the hell did they decide to do this? Also, anyone saying that Hisoka only likes Gon because he's powerful, you're seriously coping, because this ain't right. But once Hisoka calms down a bit, the fight can properly begin, and despite how weird Hisoka is, this fight is excellent. As firstly, the animation quality was just completely incredible, especially for the time. Like, if you compare this fight to a lot of other series in 2011, it will seem godly in comparison. But enough about the animation, because during this fight, we get to see Gon lock in, because he pulls off a multitude of impressive moves, one after another, in attempt to land one punch on Hisoka. However, Hisoka is still extremely powerful, even though he's currently horny beyond belief. Hisoka is still incredibly skilled, but Gon hasn't given up on that punch just yet. So Gon tears a stone slab from the floor and then hurls it at Hisoka, but before it can hit him, Gon smashes the stone slab, causing rubble to fly everywhere, which then allows Gon to sneak up behind Hisoka and land a hit on him for the first time. And now Gon has also gotten his payback for what happened during the Hunter exam, but just because Gon has achieved his goal doesn't mean the match is over. So after Gon hands Hisoka his badge from the Hunter exam, the match continues. Although I kinda wish it hadn't, as Hisoka is finally taking the battle seriously now. He's finally started moving and he's now using his Nen abilities, but when Gon figures out the weakness to bungee gum, he runs straight at Hisoka instead of letting himself be pulled in. But this causes Hisoka to have a bit of a moment, but what do I mean by that? Well, Hisoka straight up has an orgasm, and it was at this point where I was genuinely wondering what the bloody hell I was watching, because I've never seen anything like this. Really, what sort of A-class substance was going through Togashi's body when he made this? Because it must have been pretty heavy, as I have no idea who would write this shit if not on drugs. But back to the battle itself, which ends with Gon losing, because the referee figured that if he let Gon fight Hisoka much longer, he could die, so Hisoka ends up winning anyways. But it doesn't really matter, because Gon managed to complete his goal of punching Hisoka, and he managed to make it through a fight with both his arms intact, which I'd say is a win, but that is the last fight that Gon will be taking part in whilst at Heaven's Arena. So him and Killua say goodbye to Zushi and Wing before heading off to Whale Island. And I love the 2 episodes spent on Whale Island because they're just so wholesome and adorable, which helps heal the mind after everything this series just put us through. Also, I like that Togashi set up the Greed Island arc here because it gives Gon and Killua a better motive for the next arc, and I really enjoyed how Jing was portrayed in the recording we hear of him, because it completely flips our perspective of him on its head. The way Gon and everyone talks about Jing leads us to believe that he's some kind of saint that only left Gon because he needed to help people or something, but in reality he's just a deadbeat dad that would rather be off exploring and having fun instead of caring for his own child. And I like this because it felt way more realistic. Not every father is actually a good person, sometimes they're just deadbeats, and Gon's blind admiration towards his father was actually a little upsetting to watch, because even though his father has quite literally said he doesn't want to see his son, Gon is still trying to find him at all cost. Which is why Gon needs to get his hands on a game made for hunters called Greed Island, which will be up for auction in York New City, but the game will end up being pretty low on their priorities because, whilst in York New City, Gon, Killua, Leorio, and Kurapika will have to deal with the Phantom Troop. But that'll have to wait until next episode because this video would be almost an hour long if I talked about York New City as well. So instead, I'm just gonna finish by covering covering a few things I really liked about Heaven's Arena. Starting with Nen, because I think it's the best power system in anime period. It's extremely difficult to understand, but once you understand the basics, it's actually really interesting and unique. Not to mention, anyone can learn Nen and create their own abilities using it. However, the knowledge of Nen is being hidden by the Hunter Association as a method to stop it from falling into the wrong hands. But even so, if someone had the knowledge of Nen's existence, they would be able to learn it. Nen isn't just some random ability that people are blessed with, and it isn't based on luck either, so that makes it far superior to a lot of other power systems in anime. So many of them are just completely flawed. Like, My Hero Academia is one of the worst examples of a power system. It's a world where everyone is given power practically at random, so some people can be blessed with the ability to cause earthquakes or shoot magma from their fingertips, while some people are simply turned into bugs, which is completely unfair, and I realise that the series does point out that not everyone is born equal, but that doesn't make up for the fact that these make absolutely no sense. How did they come into being? How do they work? I haven't watched the entirety of the series because honestly I thought it was a bit bad, so it's completely possible that I've missed out on an explanation, but if that is really how powers work in My Hero Academia, then its power system is completely and utterly rubbish. And I really like creativity when it comes to power systems. Like, My Hero Academia is creative, but you also have to make power systems make sense, or else it just becomes a little stupid. But back to Hunter x Hunter, because I now want to talk about my second point. The fights, which were all incredible, even the minor ones, because Togashi used Nen in such a creative way that made even fights like Killua vs Railvelt feel so interesting and engaging. Also, the animation was just simply incredible. Like, honestly, I don't think there were a lot of anime with such great animation back then, and if there was, then please feel free to let me know, because I'd love to check them out. But moving on, because I've got one last point I'd like to cover. That being the characters. I think Togashi got really creative with some characters, but above everyone else, I really enjoyed Castro. Seeing his slow deterioration during his fight was so heartbreaking, because you can see his cold and calculated demeanor slowly fade as he realizes just how strong Hisoka is. And aside from him, I really enjoyed Zushi because his meeting with Gon and Killua just felt so natural. It's obvious that they befriend each other because they're a group of small children that for some reason are allowed to compete in very dangerous battles, so it makes sense that they would have some form of friendship. But that is about all I wanted to say for Heaven's Arena, which makes this the end of the video. However, I'll be back with episode 3 of the Hunter x Hunter series soon, where I'll be talking about the third arc, York New City, which is one hell of an arc, that's for sure. So if you want to stick around for that, I recommend that you like, comment, and subscribe with the bell on, so you won't miss any uploads from me. But with that all said and done, goodbye to you lovely, lovely people.